Hello, and thank you for joining us today as we remember those who served. And I've got a bit of footage here today from Battlefield 942, but I just wanted to make it a bit more personal to at least my family. Since, sometimes I've wondered a bit about whether I should have served. That's why I don't appear in these remembrance videos, because I never served. I put my name forward, but the army said not at this time. I'll get back to that later, but there were people who did back then, and other times as well. But we'll concentrate on the World War II stories for now. It being the 80th anniversary of the end. Such as there with my great-granddad Frank, who served in the Royal Artillery of the British Army. Great-uncle Bill, who was in the RAF, Royal Air Force. And of course my aunt's relatives in Norway who helped out with the Norwegian resistance. And wanted to play their part in keeping Britain and Norway safe, or doing what they could for them. That, the fact that I wasn't a professional soldier. But then again, neither were they. I mean, when I say professional soldier, I believe it's a term normally used in Britain to refer to, I think they call them career soldiers in America. I'm not entirely sure, but the point is, they didn't, sign up in civilian life and then carry on with their military career as the war started. No, I mean, great-granddad Frank was a steel worker before the war. Sorry, I'm thinking about it. Gets a bit emotional just... Anyway. And, older than a lot of the guys who went over. Yeah. He was pushing 40 by the time his unit went over to France in 1944. It was great. Then there was, of course, the great Uncle Bill in the Lancasters. Mid-gunner. Apparently he always told people his was the least important job. Sorry, one of those things that I just always picked up on was how often I'd be told how they often told people that their part wasn't that important. They didn't try and, they often tried to, just not trying to make a big heroic thing of it. Even with the with the resistance workers, the fighters, people are helping out the resistance in Norway. But after the war, great Uncle Bill became a milkman. But it's just that point, really. A civilian life. In a lot of ways, quite a nice life. Obviously, during a big war, it can be a lot harder. But, being at home with your loved ones, I mean, great-granddad Frank had a wife and kids, like my granddad, back home in Lancashire. And, of course, he was in a reserved occupation, which meant he was exempt from being conscripted because because the government decided that his job required too much upper body strength and was too specialised for him to be replaced, and so he didn't have to join up, and so he didn't have to be called up. He still went. He still volunteered. Why, of course, is a matter I need not go into here. Might as well. Maybe we'll get together the full details, I guess, and give Great Grandad Frank his own story. Well, either way, how he chose to, making that choice. As I say, not a conscript, but a volunteer. Chose to put the civilian life to one side and then go to war. Facing it on all the stuff that war really throws at people. I know, really. Maybe I should say something clever at this point, but no. They did that for them. It was their story. And the way they fought, risked it all. Doing what they could, and then it makes you wonder. So, as I say, did I let them down by not signing up and not serving? Well, because I'd had wondered about that, given the whole freedom isn't free. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing the entire song from Team America, but you get that idea. And in a way, probably not. Because perhaps the fact that we can live in a relatively safe and happy world in a Britain and a Norway free of tyrants and pain and all the brutality that the Nazis would inflict upon us. Norway did suffer a occupation, but it ended, and they played a part in making that happen. Almost being able to live a civilian life is perhaps maybe a little sign that, as it were, a job well done. They could go home and say, you know what, we did our part. Obviously not everyone was able to, but it's just in the case of my family in World War II, they did. But, taking up that civilian, and then they themselves taking up that civilian life, even though they probably knew people who didn't. Kind of like how Great Grandad Henry, who we talked about in last year's video, when he came back from World War I and would tell people that he was glad to be alive. His sort of reflection on the war being he was glad to be alive and get back to that, doing civilian things, living a civilian life, being able to say, there's a sort of, you did a good job, guys, well done. We made it. And maybe now to try and live that best life and make things as good as we can, as a sort of way that, as it were, they won the war. Now it's up to us to win the peace. So to all those who served and are serving, for everyone out there, It was lovely having you here.